Yo, what's up boys and girls? This week's chapter was fucking amazing. I mean, it's much like I predicted it was going to be, more or less down to the details, seeing as we not only got to see the continuation and wrap up of the backstory, but also some pretty interesting information about Crimson Riot surface, which I really like. Just what I needed for my upcoming discussion, so I'll most likely be doing that soon since the flashbacks seem to be over. So in last week's chapter we saw how Kirishima began to hesitate with his choice to apply to UA, and in this week's chapter we see how that hesitation developed into him actually applying to UA, with absolutely no hesitation and not a care in the world what other people think of him. So Kirishima had apparently completely forgotten the true meaning of Crimson Riot's words from the last chapter. We obviously knew that Crimson Riot were saying about how a manly spirit is considerably more important than one's quirk. Kirishima obviously thought this was referring to how brave and fearless one is when charging into the fray in order to prevent a crime like a villain attack or anything like that, but because Kirishima failed to act when it was needed the most, he then interpreted that inability to act as him not having the spirit that his idol valued more than anything. But in reality, that's not what Crimson Riot was talking about at all. We see how Kirishima actually pulls out his recording of one of Crimson Riot's interviews where he's asked questions about this manly spirit, as it were, and we learn quite a lot from this that we didn't already know about Crimson Riot. Firstly, we learned that what is actually pushing Crimson Riot to be such a forward-going hero is fear itself. He feels fear just like anyone else, and this is something that Kirishima had forgotten since his days in elementary school. He forgot the interpretation of Crimson Riot's message. It's not about bravery, but rather it's about being a hero, whatever that may mean, and for Crimson Riot, as he puts it in this chapter, was that he would charge in recklessly because that could mean the difference between having to bear witness to an innocent bystander's death and that bystander being saved. He acts quickly because that feeling is something that he finds far worse than death itself. He would rather risk his own life with the hopes that whoever's caught in action will not die, because as he said, it's seeing the final expression on someone who's just lost their life and the tormenting feeling of not being able to save them. That feeling is something Crimson Riot doesn't want to feel ever again, because he has had so much experience with people dying because of him being much like Kirishima in his earlier days, more than likely. We also learned that, much like I said in the last review, that Crimson Riot does actually have a similar quirk to Kirishima. We don't know exactly what quirk it is, but we do know that it is in some way similar to that of Kirishima's. So it probably increases his defensive power or fortitude in some way, be it another form of hardening or something entirely different. It's kind of hard to guess really, since the possibilities are endless in a situation like quirks, where it can sprout in literally any direction. He's also known as the hero of chivalry, and that's something that we learned last week, and based on that information we got, I don't think it's related to his quirk, but rather his ability to be able to charge into villain activity without hesitating despite the odds. He does it to save whoever needs saving, and that's the kind of hero Kirishima wants to be, so I have no doubt that we're going to be seeing that part of Kirishima develop even further as the series progresses, especially since we've yet to see Crimson Riot other than in Kirishima's flashbacks, and because of this we don't know if he's dead or alive, but I'm kinda guessing he's alive, to be honest, and that's another thing I'll be bringing up in one of my discussion videos coming up. Crimson Riot plays a heavy role in the discussion, even though it's not directly a discussion about him. Okay, moving on to the moment with Kirishima and Ashido. So this was of course when Kirishima's confidence of becoming a hero was really at its peak, even if he did still have some concerns deep within him. And Ashido did notice this right away. Kirishima may have had his new look, which is the regular look that we know, with the red spiky hair instead of the black basic hair. On the outside he really stands out, but on the inside he's still really stiff, because even with the right mindset you're not going to completely transform into a man full of confidence overnight. It takes time, and we see this really cute moment with Ashido loosening Kirishima up, so to speak. Up until this point we haven't really seen much progress of a proper romance involving either Kirishima or Ashido, but I think it's safe to assume that this might be a clue that they're the ones who may end up together. Of course there isn't really enough to go on to make an all-out assumption that they will end up together, but they very well could. good if they have more progression in the future, especially since, at least in my opinion, they work really good together in that regard. Kirishima and Ashido are both really positive people, and if Kirishima needs someone to loosen him up a bit, Ashido clearly has what it takes to make that happen. No doubt it would go the other way around as well. If Ashido ends up in an emotionally tight spot, Kirishima could probably set her straight without having to raise his voice or anything else that would seem like something negative. Last thing I want to talk about is actually what we saw by the very end when the flashback is over and Fat Gum just goes in on the Expendables before him in his new form that we saw 2 chapters ago. And Jesus fuck, not only does he manage to grab Kirishima after his sacrifice, but he also demolishes the protective barrier. In fact, he destroys it so hard that both of the Expendables within it are faced with an instant defeat. The power behind Fat Gum's absorbed power was simply too much for them to handle. That's what you get for dealing with a pro hero. Fat Gum may seem like your average hero, just being able to absorb things into his body, but clearly, if you push him too far, you're going to get a result that is way too much for you to handle, no matter how big the power gap may have been at the beginning. So yeah, their fight is now over by the looks of things, and hopefully we get to see some Togata next chapter. I'd really like that, but it's kinda hard to predict in all honesty, since it could just go to someone else like Izuku's group. I mean, Izuku's the main character, so I doubt Horikoshi is just going to avoid having him fight an Expendable. I don't think Izuku will be fighting Overhaul, to be honest, but to have him fight an Expendable that's quite powerful is something that we'll be seeing at the very least, I think. Same goes for Togata really. He may have to fight an Expendable before Overhaul, since he can't keep his quirk up forever. If he could, he may have been able to go straight to Overhaul, but since he gotta stop for air and regain his vision and whatnot, he'll need to make a few stops along the way, and this is when I suspect 1 or 2 Expendables may find their way to him. I don't really know how many Expendables remain. I think we've had 6 now in total if we count the guy who could manipulate the walls. If not, then that makes 5. So there's at least 2 remaining, and on top of that, Overhaul of course. Anyway, I'll be ending the review here. Let me know what you think down below in the comments, and as always, if you did, please like this video if you enjoyed and subscribe if you're new to my channel. This has been your favorite host Perm, and I'll see you soon.